Paul is saying, thank you, Nelu, for the amazing presentation and presenting. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, that was what I said. I was just thanking you, Nelu, for the lovely introduction. I'm really glad to be here. It's amazing to be talking to people in this corner of the world. I mean, we all do the same thing. It's just sometimes we're not connected due to barriers like time zones, for example. So one of the things I'm curious to know is more about the audience. I wanted to know where people were calling from. We've done most of that. I was just curious to know the variety of career paths people have taken, attendees on the call. What do you do? Are there Scrum Masters? Just a thumbs up. Are you an Agile coach? Are you a project manager, delivery manager? I'm just curious to know.
I guess if you put it in the chat, you could put
yes, please.
The title in there.
Okay, technical project manager, brilliant. All right, Mystique is a Scrum Master. Organizational agility, Kanban coach and trainer, as well as DevOps transformation. Brilliant. Interesting. There's somebody in the waiting room. Should we admit?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Right. So as you can see, I will be talking about neurodiversity. And then that's my other question, actually. How much do you know about neurodiversity? And have you encountered anything regarding neurodiversity on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being zilch, nothing at all, to 5 being I'm a pro, I'm an expert, I deal with this all the time? Yeah, 4 being a lot. So yeah, please feel free to write on the chat. I just want to get the sense for, yeah, I've seen 2.5. Thank you, Taz.
So just to let you know, we have a poll open. If you guys wanted to use that, the link is there, and Nelu just shared it.
Okay.
But whatever's easier for you.
Yeah. Okay, none, 50%. Okay. All right. Anyway, we will revisit the results of the poll. I will just kick this off. So the title of my topic, as you can see, is Tackling Neuromarginalization in Software Engineering, focusing on agility and neurodiversity. And these are the things I will be trying to cover. As much as time permits, I will be going through this pretty quickly because we've just got kind of less than an hour, but I'll be able to sum up the core of the message. And I would start by explaining neurodiversity, its origins. I'll set the scene so we understand which context we are talking about. I will look at intersectionalities in neurodiversity.
Sure, my apologies. You're not sharing your screen right now. You're not.
Oh, I'm not. Okay. Oh, brilliant. Let me go back to that again. Yes.
There we go.
Brilliant. So yeah, I was saying the title of the topic is Tackling Neuromarginalization in Software Engineering, Agility and Neurodiversity. And I will be talking about neurodiversity. I'll explain the origins. I won't go into a lot of detail. I just want to grab an element that I'll be talking about. I will look at intersectionalities in neurodiversity. Data, see what the data says. It makes sense to be empirical. That's what Scrum and Agile recommend. I'll look at the problem and what are the common challenges we face. What are the common challenges neurodivergents face? And how do we tackle neuromarginalization using the Agile framework? Has this been done before? I will be giving some case studies as proof. I will talk about the clash of ideas, because surprisingly, there are those who are against neurodiversity. So I'll be looking at the arguments of those for and against. And then I'll talk about IT organizations, embracing neuro-inclusivity. What does that even mean? And then the key message, what I want us to take away, and some recommendations. So setting the scene, what is neurodiversity? Without going into all the details, just lunging straight into the etymology. It was coined by a sociologist, Judy Singer. And the surprising thing is, when you hear neurodiversity, you would think it has to be, super scientific. It is quite scientific. However, the term in itself is an offshoot of sociology, study of human interaction and society. So from this perspective, we have the school, who is the socio-political angle, who say, and they align themselves with disability rights and movements, they align themselves with diversity groups, and they focus on eliminating the stigmas associated with neurological difference or neurodivergence. And note how I use the word neurological difference. We avoid terms like disability or anything that has a negative connotation or context. Now, we also have the clinical and diagnostic perspective. These people come from a neurodevelopmental angle, and they refer to conditions such as ADHD, autism, spectrum disorder, and others like dyslexia. They class this as from a clinical perspective. Now, we will be revisiting these various schools of thoughts, these various groups, and it is from these groups that we will be venturing into the topic of those who are pro and anti neurodiversity. Now, who are the key neurodivergents of interest? I'm talking in this presentation, I will be focusing on software platform engineers, developers, designers, testers, people in agile teams, in some cases, techies and non-techies within IT organizations, within IT departments. And a good example of who these people are, for example, folks with ADHD, which manifests as inattention, distractibility, and impulsivity. Those within the range of the autism spectrum disorder, no matter how mild or high. People who have dyslexia or dyscalculia, which has to do with challenges with dealing with and identifying numbers. However, I'm also looking at atypicals in general. And by this, I mean, you have people in our agile teams who are just, extreme introverts. They do not talk. It's difficult to get ideas churning on the spot. They need time to take stuff away. I consider these atypicals, people who think slightly differently, and I will come into that from time to time. We have those with Tourette syndrome and other developmental coordination disorders. Now, as a minority myself, I will be looking at and acknowledging the othered neurodivergence. And by these, I'm talking about the intersectionalities in neurodiversity. Now, why are these people important? It's because neurodivergence from, for example, ethnic minorities, poorer backgrounds, in most cases, even women, people who are LGBTQ identify like that, are mainly the individuals who would never disclose that there are neurodivergence within a team. They would usually be quiet because they are dealing with a lot of stuff. They're also mitigating and navigating other levels of discrimination. And then to add this into the picture, they would most likely be unable. Now, what is our task as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches? How do we keep our eyes open for these differences that are not very visible? That's one of the biggest challenge. So I'll be acknowledging and giving a nod to all of these people from those marginalized, in some cases, marginalized backgrounds. Now, the foundations of neurodiversity kind of springs from biodiversity. If you, for example, think about a garden that has a crop, like a monocrop, it's just that, it's just bare. But if you go into wildlife that is diverse with various flowers and plants, it's more exciting. Having one type of plant is boring. So from that perspective, those who are the proponents of neurodiversity are trying to say that having neurodiversity in the workplace has an extra boost to a company, to an organization, to a team. They come with various potentials that could enrich our organization. And due to this comparison with biodiversity being a good thing, we have seen a rising acknowledgement for the benefits of neurodiversity in technology. And we can see that because of all the publications by notable organizations and institutions. For example, the Harvard Business Review published an article outlining the unique strengths of neurodiverse individuals in software development. Forbes made a publication not too long ago and made a business case for neurodiversity in the workplace. So they've even gone into the economy. It's not just the hearsay, they've gone into the facts and the numbers, saying that there is a lot of advantage of hiring neurodiverse individuals within software engineering. There's also the Tech Republic, an article published. And it hasn't just ended with the theoretical, we also have the practical. So Microsoft, for example, has the autistic hiring program. They've created this initiative that brings in folks with autism into software engineering and related fields. IBM also has this neurodiversity pathways program that aims to recruit and train neurodivergents. Ernst & Young has also done the same. So if everybody acknowledges the advantage, I'm sure you're wondering, what then is the problem? So we will be looking now at neuromarginalization and the common challenges. Now, what does the data say? 1 in 7 are neurodivergent. Therefore, potentially over 1 billion neurodivergent people live in the world today. 75% of dyslexic folks believe the recruitment process puts dyslexic people at a disadvantage. A study carried out by ONS, which is the Office for National Statistics within the UK, says that just 21.7% of autistic people are employed. So there is a huge marginalization there. And the EU Commission ran a study that states that almost 10% of the total workforce in the EU are neurodiverse. However, only a few of that percentage is fully employed. And we can see a trend. Also in the US, an employment survey ran in the United States states that unemployment for the neurodivergent individuals is as high as 30 to 40%. So the numbers are not looking good. Now, what is the problem and where exactly do we see these marginalization? I would say, first of all, the entry level, from the start, which is the door into employment. And these are the barriers that neurodivergents face. And why? It is because our recruitment processes are usually targeted towards those who come into the interview boardroom and wow all the interviewers, look you in the face, say those amazing things you want to hear. They are kind of warm people that pull your heartstrings. And not just that, even from the point of looking and reviewing the CVs, we kind of go for people with degrees, those with amazing CVs. These days, the AI kind of sieves the CV, looking for the words you were looking for, those buzzwords like, transformation expert and stuff like that. However, neurodivergents would struggle with even going through college and coming out with a degree for starters. So there is already some sort of exclusion from the point we look at the CVs to the interview room in the way they perform. There is also underrepresentation in technology, and I'm talking about the tools. I don't know how many of you have technical teams who work with in environments within Amazon Web Services, Azure, or the GitLabs and GitHubs. The question is, have these environments, have they been built for neurodivergence? Have we considered these people in the way we design these things? And there is the myth of the lone techie. it's really interesting because I grew up, I hear a lot of work colleagues who say they have neurodivergent kids who are a bit atypical, quiet, keep to themselves. And the usual myth is that, oh, don't worry. If you have ADHD or you're autistic, you don't have any, just learn to code and you'll get a job in a wonderful organization. You'll be surrounded by techies and you'll be given a room where you can just code and no need to interact with anyone. You just, the loner who codes away, really techy and geeky. But this isn't really true in our modern organization. Walk into a typical IT department and the first thing you see is technical teams standing together during their stand-up. There is business requirements collection from stakeholders. You're collecting requirements constantly. You're pair programming with other colleagues. You are giving a demo during a sprint review, getting feedback from the customer. It's not that mindset of stay away and you can code and you don't need to talk to anyone. Neurodivergent struggle in this environment. So the workplace is already at a disadvantage for these groups. And then there is that usual thing where we ignore the intersectionalities of neurodiversity. We ignore the fact that there are, minorities, Black people, brown people, you name it, people from poorer backgrounds, and even people whose neurodiversity is as a result of trauma. I have worked with people who have come out from war-torn countries, and the shock and the trauma from that is still something they have to contend with every day, and this impacts on their work. So how do we use the Agile framework to unlock the potentials for neurodivergence? How can Agile help make the work environment a better place? How can our organizations tap into the skill set of these people? What I'm trying to say is that we could use the Agile framework. We've got lots of tools at our disposal. So one example is the point of entry. When you look at the way we interview, our hiring processes, we could turn things around and make things slightly different. So rather than focusing on those resumes and CVs, interviews, we could think slightly differently, run a hackathon, kick off a design sprint where people just grab an idea, experiment, get some feedback, and start again. We could create coding challenges for these individuals. We could work out some simulations where we can get their skills so that those who are, for example, those who are introverts will be able to demonstrate their skills through what they do, and we can start to judge things slightly differently. Agile recruitments can be very flexible, in the way we set up our job descriptions, creating flexible working patterns, leaving the Agile mandate, not by words only, but by actions. And there are some organizations that have begun to do this. Microsoft, for example, in their Neurodiversity hiring program, have created a simple iterative process through collections of CV, interview preparation, and skills assessment. They've been able to achieve this. So why Agile ways of working then for neurodivergence? First of all, in the navigation of challenges, we realize that in every Agile team, there is a potential that 1 in every 5 people could be dealing with a form of depression or PTSD and would need some help. How do we navigate the introversion? So as an effective Agile coach, I have been through an experience where a colleague was struggling. And what I did was to almost tap into that Scrum Master, one of the stances of the Scrum Master being an effective facilitator, helping introverts to be more productive during our sessions throughout work through asynchronous prepping of what needs to be done, be it in the form of agenda, gathering thoughts together in preparation in advance, encouraging psychological safety within the team. We know these elements that you have to introduce into the team as an effective Agile coach, as a delivery manager, as a technical project manager, using Kanban, walking through the workflows, using those visual cues, pushing forward all of those Scrum values of courage and empowerment within the team. These are the ways we can make the workplace slightly more conducive. Other experts, for example, Carrie Kelly has provided an example of a Scrum Master who has observed a team member that struggled and recommended the Scrum values of respect, openness, and focus. We can also create agile, friendly spaces. I have worked with a colleague whose way of thinking is slightly different. He has this hyper-focused, non-linear way of thinking. And the best way I can explain that to you is, if you pause for 1 minute and think back, have you ever had a problem that you were struggling to solve, a challenge, but then you noticed that while you were ruminating in your mind, you couldn't get through, you went to bed, slept, but when you woke up in the morning, you suddenly had this aha moment? Now, if that has ever happened to you, if you're on this call and you've ever experienced this, science says it's the subconscious working while you sleep. You've tapped into another part of your brain. Now, there are some neurodivergents that do this on the fly. I have worked with a colleague who is like this. He just thinks differently. And creating that agile environment is a good way to tap into their experience. Now, common traits of another example is a Scrum Master who, and I call him Scrum Master B. He has this challenge of executive dysfunction. And what is executive dysfunction? Is that inability, a weakness in the cognitive process that organizes thoughts and activities. So he struggles with prioritizing tasks, managing his time efficiently, and making decisions. He just continues to stall and procrastinate. And people with this challenge, executive dysfunction, some of the common traits, both for children and adults, are struggling to organize their materials, regulation of their emotions, they're unable to set schedules, they're unable to stick to tasks, they just struggle, they're unable to do that. Now, this Scrum Master was struggling with a project which was launching his own website. He was struggling with activation, action, memory, getting things moving and regulating his emotions, effort, and focus. But what did he do? He took a step back and decided to take his own advice. So rather than launching at the project from a massive perspective, he decided to break them down into small chunks, break them down into deliverable pieces, implementing, delivering, getting feedback, repeating. And that was the way he was able to push forward, kind of taking a dose of his own medicine, applying Scrum into his own way of life. There's been a post on scrum.org. This isn't anonymized. You can find it on the scrum.org website. It's from an individual known as Sally Waters, who is a computer programmer in Sky. Her husband, Francis, is a case study on that website, struggles with ADHD. Now, what are the key challenges for Francis? He's unable to stay ahead of his schedule. He gets overwhelmed, goes into the grocery store for breakfast and only focuses on what he's getting for breakfast. He comes back really motivated, and after a few minutes after breakfast, he doesn't know what to do with himself. He loses all his energy. On serious medications, and the medications create these temporary dopamine effects that impacts on him. He's unemployed, a heavy smoker, and an alcoholic. So his wife, Sally, goes for an agile training, comes back home and says, Francis, we're going to do this. I've gone through this training and I think Scrum and agile could work for us. Let's try this at home. So they really got excited about it, started to use Post-it notes, use the wall in the house, use the ribbons to create tasks and identify and link tasks with their dependencies. She ran through the fundamentals and concepts of agile, the manifesto, the principles, and over time, they started to see very quick results. Now, one of the first results they saw was that the house was slightly becoming cleaner, less chaos, things were becoming organized. After a couple of months, Francis was able to target a goal to quit smoking. He noticed a difference with his career progression. He received a call, went through an interview. He's currently become a paramedic. And now the couple are using Scrum almost religiously in their daily lives to not just plan their wedding, but to plan their dream holiday trip to Vietnam. So we've looked at this practical bits where Agile and Scrum can help. And the surprising fact is that there are some people who are against neurodiversity and neurodivergence. Now, why is that, we would ask? It is surprising to know, but it is the case. So the first group of people are parents of autistic children and some autism researchers who are accusing neurodiversity advocates of presenting a sanitized view. So these are parents of neurodivergence. Some of their kids have dyslexia, autism, ADHD, and they're trying to say that when you over-celebrate neurodiversity, you're almost ignoring the medical side of things, the fact that sometimes these people need help. They might require some medication. By celebrating it, you're almost kind of diminishing the bits where they need help, and you're removing the attention of the authorities or the government who could allocate more resources towards helping them. So these people are kicking against, that singing and dancing version of neurodiversity. One proponent is Jonathan Mitchell, who's an autistic writer and blogger, and he's criticizing the neurodiversity movement that they are rejecting the medical model of disability. So he's trying to say these folks, they need help, they need medication. However, people like Judy Singer have countered these arguments, and they're saying that, look, we know there is the medical side of the world. And some of the messages I'm trying to give in this talk is that even though we are not medical, we are the people who work with these colleagues on a day-to-day. When a neurodivergent ADHD patient walks into the hospital, it's an appointment for a maximum of an hour, half an hour. We work with these people almost full-time, every day, 5 times a week, and depending on, and we are saying that they should be celebrated. There is a space for recognizing these differences. It is actually evolution that has benefited and favored these neurological differences. There is something to learn from it. All we need to do is to adjust the workplace slightly to make it more conducive for these individuals. Judy Singer is also saying that psychomedical professions are suffering from the here it is, it's a long one. They suffer from the syndrome known as when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you see everything from a neurodivergent perspective as a medical ailment or a problem, you would want to approach it from that medical perspective of medicating, and that's not what the whole world is about. Now, I will be talking about an empirical overview, some sort of quantitative and qualitative data that has shown that there are benefits of neuro-inclusion within a team. If we open the doors for these colleagues, if we begin to think differently, if we begin to look at recruitment differently, if you begin to look at that colleague whom during the daily scrum, his task is sitting on to do for 7 days, I'm kind of asking us to look at it differently, try to understand why is that colleague struggling? What's the problem? Is there a way we could tweak things slightly? We need to consider all of these individuals. So for example, HP and JP Morgan have carried out a study that says that neurodiverse teams are 30% more productive than neurotypical techies. And this has been proved through lots of simulations and tests, and they realized that they are 48% faster in completing their tasks. Tim Goldstein, who is an expert on ASD and technologists, has identified the fact that neurodivergence, people with ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, have a big advantage in the way they approach technological challenges. They have this ability to focus for hours on a level beyond what most people can do. Optimize is an initiative, is a campaign that was kicked off by the Optimize organization. They have a neuro-inclusion campaign, and they're trying to say that apart from the economics, apart from the benefits that are kind of related to a monetary perspective, if you look at it differently, there are other benefits of neurodiversity. When there is neuro inclusion within a team, when you include everyone, when everyone is welcome to participate on the table, it boosts morale, it boosts a better working culture in an organization, it increases psychological safety, it boosts creativity, innovation, and better engagement with stakeholders. SAP has an Autism at Work initiative, and one of the best experiments of this initiative took place in India, where they found out that employees on the autism spectrum engaged in roles such as data analysis, project management, graphic design, and finance. They really do well. Now, what are the adverse effects of a lack of neurodiversity in software organizations? These days, as technological organizations, these days of a digital transformation age, if you are unable to open the doors to diversity in all its forms, you would be lacking from tapping into such a competitive market. You would lose the skills that these people bring. Software industries that lack neuro inclusion are missing out on an overlooked segment. So if you have people who are neurodivergent in a team, they bring a different element in the way they design software, in the way they reach out to the wider market, to those marginalized markets, and you almost gain an advantage. When you exclude them, you are losing out on these differences. And the negative impacts of neurodiversity is not only financial, like I said previously on the advantages. By not having neurodivergence in your organization, you are impacting the morale, the culture of your organization. So I am aware I have spoken loads, I have spoken a lot. I just wanted to check based on what you have heard, and please feel free to use the chat. What do you think you want to take away based on what you've heard so far in your approach to neurodiversity, in your approach to working with neurodivergent software engineers, testers, platform engineers within your team? What do you think we can take away from this? What do you think you can do differently? Please feel free to throw them into the chat. I'm just curious to see before we continue.
You can also go off mute if by some reason you can put it in the chat.
I actually prepared a Jamboard for this. I hope we have enough time to, yeah, it's just here and everyone can access it. Click on the post-it. I will share this tab so you see what I'm seeing. So the question is, considering what you have heard so far, what do you want to start doing differently regarding neurodiversity and neurodivergent colleagues?
Sure, I think it's people can only read, not type in.
Oh, I see. Really? Oh no.
Yeah.
All right.
You have to open the link to everyone.
I've changed it. I've changed it. Bear with me.
Okay, so you have to just refresh your screen and you will. Okay, there you go. So Robert, yeah. Put it in the chat. I'm gonna put it in a sticky for you, Robert. There we go.
Yeah, thanks for that, Robert. I've seen your post on the chat. So while people are writing, I'll just give a kind of more practical angle. I gave this talk in my Agile community of practice, and already the head of engineering in my team started to see things differently. So we had an interview where the software engineers were saying, we just saw this candidate, he could barely look into the screen. I think we're not promoting him to the next phase. And he went, nah, after the talk I gave, he was like, nah, let's find another way to test him. Like, let's create an assessment. Let's test his coding skills. We don't want those people who just, talk the talk, and perhaps months later you might realize that. So we're beginning to look at things slightly differently, and beginning to not just judge people who are not eloquent in an interview, but try to dig slightly deeper, prepare some material beforehand, get them to run an assessment, bring people together, run a hackathon, create a simulation, test their problem-solving skills, just give people slightly more opportunity. Right, so yeah, feel free to continue filling that in if you can. And I will just switch back into the slide. So key messages and takeaways. As a team lead, Scrum Master, Agile coach, project manager, product manager, let's help the teams become more effective. Pay close attention to each person's individual tendencies. Let's begin to use the Agile framework slightly differently. We have tools that really equips us for achieving amazing things. Things like the Scrum values of courage, focus, and commitment. Let's begin to use these well. The 3 pillars of empiricism, transparency, adaptation, when applied correctly, can become valuable tools for neuro-inclusivity. It is not just enough to build inclusive products or tools. We should accommodate neurodivergence. The most important thing then is the mindset. That's where the work needs to be done. Let's educate ourselves, embrace a more neuro-inclusive mindset. This isn't something that needs fixing. These individuals are the way they are. They have a lot to offer. They have a lot to bring. One important thing is also the language. Let's work on our language. Avoid labeling words. Some people like disability, some don't, different. Based on what I've seen and heard so far, it's really different. So it's about talking to the individual, understanding how they want to be addressed and how they see themselves. Now, I'm saying here, beware the gatekeepers, because the whole discourse of neurodiversity seems to sit with the dominant group in society. There is a tendency that they become the gatekeepers. They determine who goes in and who goes out. And I'm trying to say, let's keep the door open for everyone. And with this, again, I'm talking about that intersectionality within neurodiversity. The brown people, Black people, Asian, Indian, the door is open for everyone. Nobody kind of owns this discourse. It has to be as inclusive as possible for gay, straight, you name it. The Agile framework kind of calls us to action to bring everyone in. Women, I'm talking women because we know the tech industry is male dominated. I'm sure most of the organizations I've worked, it is the same. So let's keep these open and understand the needs of our colleagues. Yeah, so I'm hoping I can get some questions. Any questions?
Thank you. So I did wanted to share with you something before you, before the questions, some of the feedback the audience wrote on the Jamboard call. So the first person who shared was Robert. I believe it was Robert. Yes, and he said, I am reevaluating my work history because this kind of explains some of my career. This is on the what can you start doing differently regarding neurodiversity and neurodivergent colleagues. Also, I believe Mystic also shared keeping closer observations of my teams and employing those strong values was key for me. I think she has been employing something differently already. Then we have 5 different ways to communicate and include colleagues to highlight their strengths. That's another one.
Yeah.
Awesome. And last but not least, I have thought about the value of bringing the conversation into team building as well as systems coaching. also want to have our hiring process to take into consideration neurodiversity and inclusivity.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Actually, some of the things I've seen, one of the advantages is that it has also triggered areas that I have not considered. This bit about bringing the conversation into the team building as well as systems coaching. I think that's really key. Robert's comment about reevaluating work history. Yeah, that is really deep. I have a colleague who, I gave this talk in Helsinki last month, and somebody was brought to tears, not just because they had kids, but because they may have judged some software engineer in the past quite harshly because they didn't consider the nature of this. And this came from the way the workflow was displayed on Jira. A colleague who struggles with the way it is. So they had to create, almost like a parallel platform to allow him to do his work and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm really, I thank you for all of these contributions. If there are any thoughts, any questions or curiosities, please feel free to ask. The floor is yours.
Great. Team, if you have any questions, put it on the chat, or you can go off mute. I think that's valuable for sure. Any questions? We're good. All right.
Okay. I just want to wrap up with a story. A couple of us may have heard about this story. It's called the Chinese farmer story. So there was a Chinese farmer, really poor, who had only one horse, and the horse ran away. So after work, all his neighbors came to him to say, "Oh, it's so unfortunate. We're sorry to hear. You must be feeling very unlucky that your only horse has run away. Now you have nothing." And all he said to them was, "Maybe." Now, flash forward about 8 days later, the runaway horse came back with 7 more wild horses from the wilderness. And after work, the neighbors gathered together to say, "Oh, you're so lucky. You used to have 1 horse and now you have 8 horses. You must feel really, really lucky and privileged." And all he said again was, "Maybe." Some days later, his son tried to tame one of the wild horses and broke his leg while he was at it. The neighbors gathered again and said, "Oh, it's so unfortunate. Your son has broken his leg. Would he be able to walk? That's so unfortunate, isn't it?" The farmer answered, "Maybe." 2 days later, the general declared war on another nation, and soldiers came to recruit young, able-bodied men for the war. And they passed his son because he couldn't fight. And the neighbors gathered together and said, "Oh, how lucky you are. Your son doesn't get to fight." And the neighbor answered, "Maybe." Now, the lesson is that in nature and society, people who we call disadvantaged, people who we call neurodivergent, people who we refer to as disabled, might actually have something to offer, something strong that could be very positive to society. That's it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. We have good feedback in the chat, sir, of this story. This was an engaging and enlightening presentation. Thank you, Paul. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. I love the fact that we were able to share this topic. I mean, I've never heard about neurodiversity in the workplace, and it was definitely enlightening for me. So if anyone has another comment, this is the opportunity for you.